I'm Jay Gibson from Manual Academy. I'm currently a senior right now.
Hi, I'm Celia Traylor. I'm a junior at Richwoods.
I'm Mercedes Torshat. I'm a junior at Richwoods too.
Hello, I'm Sinclair Gilkison. I'm a senior at Richwoods.
Well, my name is Jeff Campbell, and I'm running for the 5-year term, of course. And it's a pleasure, number one, for us to be here as candidates. I know I can speak for myself, but I'm assuming that everybody else feels the same way. But I want to say that I appreciate you guys taking the time out to be a part of this process. Even though you're probably not at the point where you can vote yet, I'm assuming that some of you might be at that point, but we just want to say that we appreciate you. Going back to myself, I moved here in 2011, December 2011. Came from Southern Illinois. Have 3 children that's in the district, 2 that attend Richwoods, 1 that attend Lindbergh. My son attends Lindbergh. 2 daughters at Richwoods High School. Moved here in 2011 from Southern Illinois, from Mount Vernon. I was actually a member of District 80 School Board down there in Mount Vernon, Vice President of School Board. Came here because of a job, and when we got here, one of the first things that we wanted to do was assess, or actually before I got here, what I wanted to do was assess the schools and the condition of the school. A lot of you might find that out moving forward, that people tend to move to places where that there is low crime and the schools are good, on top of because of an economic opportunity such as a job. When I got here, I found out that there was a lot of negativity about what was going on with the school system. Everybody was telling me what schools not to go to, send my kids to, the areas that I should live in. And I just found that it was a lot of people that had a lot of bad things to say about the school district. As a person who was passionate about education, and because I'm a public school person, that troubled me, and I felt that I needed to be a part of the solution versus the problem. So after being here about 2 years, I had people to come to me and ask me, would you consider doing this? Is this something that you would ever think of doing? Initially, I had not planned on running for school board, but I had a couple people that kept asking me, and as I began to roll this over in my mind, I felt that I should throw my hat in the ring. So that's why I'm here today.
I'm Phil Romanus, live in Peoria, born and raised here. I'm a District 150 parent. I've had 4 sons graduate from Peoria High. I currently have a daughter who's a freshman at Peoria High. I've been involved with the district for a number of years, been speaking at school board meetings, attending various meetings. People asked me years ago to run for school board, and I was hesitant because it is such a big commitment. It's a 5-year term, so that's a huge time commitment on my part. But I felt the more I got involved, the more I've been involved with the district, I felt that the needs of our children weren't being met, you know. And so I want to help restore the district back to one that we can be proud of. This was a great school district at one time, and I think we can be that again, but it's going to take the entire community's involvement to restore it to where it should be. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Hi, my name's Terry Spare. I'm a candidate for the 5-year term. I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having us tonight. I come from LaSalle, Peoria, Illinois. I taught at Dimmick Grade School for my first year. I came to Bartonville Grade School a year after that. Then I went to Monroe Grade School, and then I applied to come into District 150, and I was a fine art teacher, grade school teacher, kindergarten teacher, first grade teacher. My children both went to District 150. They went to Richwoods and Lindbergh School in Keller. My wife was a counselor at Peoria High School. I have been very active in the school as an educator. It has taken me 34 years to become a good educator, and I don't think I'm finished yet because I like to learn, I like to be a part of things. I wanted to be a school board member, not for any selfish reasons, because this was my life. This is what I did. I can relate to what the kids need. I can relate to what the teachers need. And I think I have a handle for what the parents need also. I have no aspirations to anything beyond being a school board member. I have made a commitment that I would be the kind of school member that would be inside the schools. You would not find it uncommon for me to come into your school and ask you a question and see how I could help. I think I have enough respect from the teachers in the district that they know that when I come into the building, I'm not going to come as a threat. I'm going to come as a helper and somebody that wants to do some things. In my tenure as a teacher, I have seen things go the way that should not be going. And quite frankly, I think if I was to ask you personally one-on-one, I think your biggest concern would be that you want to learn and you don't want to be disrupted when you learn. I've seen in the schools how the disruption is making you as students plead out saying, please do something to help, please do something to help. So we're listening. And throughout this whole process that we've gone through, we have excellent candidates. You cannot go wrong on any candidate at all. You cannot. I think we've grown together as a unit, and we've grown together to have a passion for you, because the bottom line is this is about you, whether you're a junior or a senior, and we want you to go to school. We want you to come back. We want you to live here.
As I said, I'm Dan Adler. I moved here about 8 years ago to work for Caterpillar, and moved here with my family. I have 2 small children, Madison and Lincoln, and they go to Keller Primary School. And together as a family, we have a good 10 years left of school to go through the district. And so I feel like I have every incentive to do what I can to ensure that our schools are as good as possible. And, I'll share with Terry that I think all of the candidates have been very great, and we have all grown as a part of talking about all the school issues that we'd like to address. And I think our role as potential board members is to knock down the barriers to help you learn, whether that's something directly to you or providing more resources to your teachers. That's our job to make it easier. And so that's why we're here, and I hope to have the opportunity to help serve you and your families.
Okay, so most of my questions tonight are going to be centered on the after, what happens after all the schooling that we go through. Mainly, something that I see at my school, Manual Academy, is that when you think of what we are going to do after school, are we being fully prepared for what happens outside of the school doors? And in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that we are. I think that what we're being told is that here, you're going to go to college, you're going to do so well. But there's really 2 things to that really kind of block that off. One being college being the only option that we're presenting to the children, and then the other, that option for the ones that are even able to attain it slightly, once they get there and they see exactly what it involves, college, they are not prepared at all. What do you think that should be the thing that we are doing to them now, maybe starting as soon as they get into kindergarten and then up through their high school years? What should we be doing to help them prepare for whatever they do feel is necessary for them to be successful in life?
I see a lot of students that have a lot of anxiety about that step after. Post-secondary education is definitely going to be a challenge for people. Everybody is not going to go to college, and we already know that. So I think that some of the emphasis should be put on what happens, again, like you say, what happens after college. Do we prepare our students to go into some type of certification programs? I think that is a big area that we need to go back to. We need to be linking up with community-based programming and look at all the options that they offer. Linking up with, of course, again, making a strong connection with community colleges, looking at the certification programs that they offer. Also preparing students for small things like how do you prepare for college when you filling out applications, or what about financing? That's a big issue with a lot of people. Again, some students, because of the fact that they come from the lower economic echelon of society, that might be a far stretch for a student, even if you have the grades to a degree to get into some of the top universities, not unless you are just off the charts with your ACT scores, SAT, whatever the case may be. So I think that the schools need to really be focusing on this at an earlier stage. Going back, you're talking about when do you start preparing? I think you need to start looking at that option when you're in 6th, 7th grade, maybe even talking about that with the student, and then preparing their minds to wrap around that concept of college or what they want to do, and then start to guide that student in that direction.
This is a great subject for me because I'm dealing with kids that are friends of my sons and their friends. College is an option for some, but only about 30% of our graduates are going to college. Okay, so what are we doing for the other 70%? We definitely need to be increasing our trade programs. We need to increase. Peoria Promise is a phenomenal program, and we need to make sure that kids are taking full advantage of that. That if you're going to go through Peoria Promise with the idea of college, you need to be ready to be taking college level classes by your senior year. You need to be thinking about whether you take an AP class or it's a dual core credit class, you need to be at that level. So when you get to college, when you get to ICC, kids aren't taking remedial classes, they're up to speed, so they can fully utilize that benefit. And then as far as the kids that are going into trades, we need to make those options available to them early. We need to let them know. A lot of kids they're just not college material. They have no desire to go to college, but they may have really good mechanical skills, those types of things, and there's a lot of programs, there's a lot of needs out there, and I've talked with people at the trades programs. They want to get into the schools. They're really eager to get in, and so I think it's a big opportunity for us if we can bring the community in to bring those options to you students.
Being in education for all of the years that I learned that I needed to know the students. I needed to know who was in my classroom. I needed to know how they learned. I needed to know what their interests were. And I would speculate now that as you go through the process of school, you have very little time where somebody sits down with you as a counselor or as a teacher and gets to know you, gets to know what your needs are, gets to know what your wants are. And I agree with what was said already, is that all kids are not going to go to college. And we have ingrained in kids that if you don't go to college, you're not going to be successful. And that is nonsense, because there are some very good people that are out there in the community doing things that have not had a college education, but they contribute and they've latched onto a trade and they know what to do and they contribute back. I think what we have done to students in the last 10 years is a disservice. We have replaced teaching with testing. And the teachers that could be creative and want to be creative can't do that because they're in a crunch to test. And we're basing your future, and we're basing on what we think that you need by tests, rather than we should be asking you right now, like we are now, what do you need besides tests? Because quite honestly, of all the tests I've given over the years, I have very, very seldom known what tests really are used for. We get a statistic back. Well, what's that used for? Where does it help you individually as students? So I agree that a lot of the things that we used to have in school, for example, one school in the district used to have a phenomenal wood shop where they made quality wood furniture and things like that, and it's gone. And that's sad.
I think the two elements that are probably most important to me is that one is that that career path, or whatever your future and what you want to define it, is yours as an individual, and that from an early age you and your family and your support structure own it. And by that I mean that we're not talking about a system or a district that produces a product the same way a manufacturing line produces something to a spec. This is something that's very much a personal element of your life, and you've got to have a stake in it. Otherwise, it's probably not going to be very meaningful to you when you come out the back end. The other element I think that's really important is that we provide you with a lot of options to see and experience what is out there, and that might be as part of the trades in terms of internships or job shadowing. It may be just getting the opportunity to do something that's really out of your comfort zone that you wouldn't normally do on your own, to teach you about yourself and about what you may want to do in the future.
I have a lot of friends who I want to help because they're dropping out of school. And I try to talk to them to try to keep them in school, but to them they feel like there is no hope for them. So how would you advocate prevention programs for teacher training and high school dropouts?
Boy, that's a tough question. That's really tough. You know, I think we need to instill in and I say kids, and don't be offended by it, but I think we need to instill in kids the value of education. You know, my dad used to tell me they can take everything from you. They can take everything, your home, your family, your money, but there's two things they can never take. They can never take your faith, and they can never take your education. And so we need to instill in kids the value of an education, whatever that education be. You know, kids that are dropping out of high school, they don't see the value of getting an education. They need to see kids that are older, that have dropped out maybe, that have come back and got their GED because they realize the value of that. You know, we need to emphasize that thing, going back to that first question. College isn't for everybody, and it shouldn't be. You know, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need beauticians, we need cooks, we need chefs, we need all those skills. Those are all skills, and those are valuable, and once you have that, nobody can take that from you. So I think we just need to instill the value of an education in kids.
I had heard something a while back, and it wasn't too long ago. I think Mr. Adler was there, and a couple other gentlemen were there too, where I heard the idea that teachers that are being hired into the school need to be an advocate for a group of students to help them get through the 4 years they're going to have in school. Am I correct in saying that? I think that's what I had heard. In my perspective, I believe that it's a very slow process, but I think at some point the kids get to know that they're not going to succeed anymore. I think the discipline problems you have in the school, 9 times out of 10, they're because kids have reached a certain level and they know they're not going to go any farther. So quite honestly, they're embarrassed because they do not know what to do. When I taught art, which was an outside elective then, the kids that came there were probably some of the toughest kids in the district that I had. When they came to art, they were fine because they could succeed in that where they couldn't succeed in a math or an English class. So I agree with what was said before. We need to reach out and find programs that we can do to help kids and intervene with them. If they're not getting a certain core subject, we need those professionals in place in an institution, in school, to help provide the resources they need to be successful and basically to feel good about themselves, because I think that's part of it too. I think kids do not feel good about themselves as much as they could.
I think the individualized elements, the valuing of education, those are, excellent points as well. I'll just add one more nugget on. We've talked to parents and heard stories of some students who don't feel like maybe the environment they go to when they go to their school, and this might not be perfectly tied to high school, but it certainly has some resonance, isn't any better, isn't any more conducive to what they consider as learning as their home or environment or any other place they might go. And I think, I don't know what the special sauce is, but we have to make it so that our schools really are that electric learning environment that that not only do our students want to come because they understand the value of what they're getting out of being educated and being kind of owning their future, but also that it's a conducive environment that they can actually go after it. Because I don't think if you don't value it and you don't feel like there's any way to make headway on your own goals, I don't know what the incentive is to be there.
Well, I think that, for the school and teachers, I think that you have to understand the correlation between the societal changes, societal issues such as poverty, and how those types of indicators play a major role in the correlation of students not completing college or not completing high school. Also, you have to take in consideration some of those support structures that are around the student. If they have poor support structures, then chances are they're probably not going to complete secondary education. As a district, I think the teachers should understand holistically what's going on with that student. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to pry into a person's life, but they need to take in consideration what they're dealing with and develop strategies on how to overcome some of those things. Part of that is again, like it's been said already, is helping the student understand the value of education, understanding the struggles that they're going to have without achieving education, and then helping them to esteem themselves and to being able to understand that they can do it, and then provide those resources around them so that they can be successful. So I think it's a multi-layered issue. And I don't think that you can address that with just one specific answer, but it's looking at it holistically, looking at the society, looking at the community, looking at the family structure.
Going back to the testing, I feel like we should have like an ACT class for juniors that they should have to take to get like the materials down what they need. And I feel like it would help them have higher scores because some of us don't know about the ICC thing or the Bradley thing to help you with your ACTs. I also just wanted to say that I feel like taking the ACTs and the park all together is really overwhelming because not all of us have just all junior classes. Some of us have art and cosmetology, and so we're missing out on our other classes, and that puts us behind. And so, because we just took the ACTs, and then right after we took the park, so I missed like almost a full week of my other classes, and I was so totally lost and just overwhelmed, and so I just wanted to put that out there. And I know you guys, I don't know if you guys can like help out with that, but I also, what he was saying earlier about testing, I feel like it's taken over the classroom environment.
I'm going to be frank with and honest. It breaks my heart to hear students say that. It really does. When I taught my first years at Limestone County, we had a committee of teachers and administrators that was called LACAC. It was called the Limestone Area Curriculum Committee. We put together standards and core values for the district, teacher-wise, administrative-wise, that we went over and over and over again. We decided which ones were good, which ones were bad, which ones were going to value you, and which ones were going to give you the most help. I have to honestly say that the tests that are made up now are probably questions that are way beyond, that are very difficult, that you have not been prepared for. In hindsight, they're probably made up by professional people, but maybe they're not professional people in the education end of it. In every school, there should be a place where you can go, and a person in that building where you can go and talk to that person about who could I get for a tutor for this. And there are people out there that are willing to tutor. My wife would be willing to come and be a tutor. Who would help me with applications? There's people that can help with applications that have gone through the process. So there's a resource of people out there, but we have to have the guts enough to say, you know what? These kids need help. Let's bring them in. Because quite honestly, the counselors are so busy, the teachers are so busy, they don't have even this much time one-on-one to talk to somebody. And it's sad. It really is sad. And I understand completely where you're coming from with that. So that's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, I share similar sentiments, I think, with most that, the concentration of the testing, whether it's, at the high school level or even at our grade school level now, I mean, it's concerning because that's, one less week or weeks that we're not, teaching fundamental concepts. We're essentially preparing for and then taking tests. And there's lots of distractions that occur during those times of environments. Movies are watched to fill in the gaps and all that kind of stuff. So it is a big disruption. But I'll pull back to the kind of the higher level issue and how did we get here in terms of all this standardized tests? And I think it's important to consider. So I would say society as a whole has a concern about, we have this system of education and we fund it in a certain way and we organize in a certain way, and in total we're concerned that we're not giving you the tools to be as successful as possible in your future. And so people question, well, how can we tell if we're doing that or not? Oh, well, let's just put a metric on it. Best way to make a metric, have everybody take a test at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. That's really where we're at from 20 different directions, is that basic simple model. And that's forced a really complex system that ties up a high amount of our funding,
Yep.
investment capital, time, stress on teachers. I mean, it's a self-compounding problem. So I think we need to do two things fundamentally. One, we need to do a better job telling the story of how we're preparing you for your future. The second thing we need to do is we actually need to do a much better job so that it's not a question anymore where we feel like we need to wrap a huge metric around it, but it's obvious.
Going back to that metric issue, I think that a lot of this is how our country is taking a finger off the pulse of education. And I think that we have been measuring ourselves globally to other countries. If you take in consideration, I just read a statistic just recently in Asia. It said that Asian students attend on an average of about 2.3 years longer than students here in the U.S. That is where we position ourselves globally. There's all kinds of studies that show that we rank 23rd or 33rd as far as globally, as far as education is concerned, math and reading. So, a lot of that is that we have to feel that we have to push our students to be globally accepted or measure up globally. So a lot of the testing that you see is to get to number one, measure where that student is. But again, I think that going back to, I think Mr. Romanus said that, I think it was Mr. Spare that said that, is that oftentimes when we get this test, what do you do with the test? How do you take the results of that test and now implement it and have a strategy around it that is going to help the student? We haven't got to that point yet. And now you see what's happening in the schools is that we're teaching to the test. You don't get, matter of fact, it's taking the place of all kind of enrichment courses. It's taking the place of all kind of courses like band and science and shop classes and things of that nature. Things that we had time to do that we can address some of the issues if a student didn't want to go to college. They were able to go to some of those trade classes. I took 4 years of building trades. I took 4 years of architectural drafting in high school. And so when I came out, I can tell you how to look at a spec. I can actually build a house if I wanted to, and I learned that in high school. So that's something that is definitely lost because you guys are being more test driven, and you're not being able to get some of the concepts that was once taught in school before. So I feel what you're saying.
I am not a fan at all of testing. I think testing is basically done for administrators. My daughter, who was in 8th grade last year, I believe she took 5 standardized tests over the course of the year. Now, for every test, you're prepping for that test. Okay, the kid, she does not do well on tests. She stresses out. And so, that's weeks out of the school year that are wasted. for a test that means absolutely nothing. I mean, I never saw the results of the test. You know, it was for the administrators. But getting back to your thing about getting the information to students, you know, that's really important. We need to sit there in junior year, you know, by freshman, sophomore year, we need to talk to the students and say, okay, do you think you're going to college? Are you planning on going to college? If you are, we should have an ACT prep class your junior year. You know, we're 1 hour out because you got to take 7 classes mandatory all day long. You know, there's no reason that one of those classes couldn't be in an ACT prep class. And it's taught all year long. And it helps those kids out, whether they go to college or not, you know. And if they don't, if they know they're not going to go to college, there's no reason that, you know, that all the other optional courses are out there. But we do need to let kids know the options. You know, you do need to know about Peoria. Peoria promises a great thing, but you probably don't know about it because nobody's coming into the schools and telling you that option is there. You know, there's all kinds of options out there. The building trades people, they really want to get into the schools and start teaching you guys building trades, you know, culinary arts, all that. That's all there. And those are great careers. I mean, you know, sometimes better off than college is going and learning a career, a trade right off the bat. So I think that's a great option. I think it's an important issue.
I really like what you all said about the trades and schooling, but I think it's very separated. I think that trades should be put back into school so that students are exposed to other options. So it's not like you have to choose between, oh, I want to go to college, but I don't know what it is like to be exposed to those things such as culinary arts or hair braiding. It's such a divide in what schooling you want to choose, but if you're exposed to it, then it's easier for you to make that decision for yourself. So what policies or programs could be implemented back into the schools to better help children decide what route they want to go earlier on?
There's a couple of things that we could do better, and I don't know how aware you are of the funding end of all this, how our schools work, but you know, we have lots of challenges. You know, lots of bills that are going to be difficult to pay. Let's put it that way. And anytime we want to start something, right, we got to figure out a way to pay for it, or we got to stop doing something else, one way or the other. And so, in my mind, the way that we do things most efficiently, and when it appears that we don't have all the resources we need, is that we do them by leveraging the great resources we already have in the community. Working with the building trades to build a program, working with a Caterpillar who may want a targeted focus in a particular area. Things that go beyond the typical, I guess, what we might consider as traditional in terms of, you know, what we fund in our schools. So I think that's an important part of it. I think having career professionals, whether they're they work in the retail industry or building trades or, you know, financial executives, it costs us negligible amount of money to have them come in and share their experience. And some schools are really good about it, especially at the grade school level. Nobody gets disappointed when a firefighter or the local police officer walks in and talks about his day job. We need to do a better job of getting those folks in our community into all of our schools. That's something we can do at a very young age. At the older ages, I think between job shadows and real meaningful internships, that's the opportunity. It's easier to inject you into the real world than it is to sometimes bring a digestible piece of the real world into our schools. So, you know, currently have a 9 to 10 month calendar. Let's use some of that downtime to get you that experience that might you might never go anywhere close to that track, but gives you a real meaningful perspective on how a piece of industry or the commercial world works, and helps shape what your career direction is.
You know, I think part of it is we do need to bring those tradespeople into the school and show students why this is applicable. You know, we need to bring a carpenter in and show students why you need geometry. You know, we need to bring a cook in, a chef in, and show why you need to know fractions, because a quarter cup of this and a third of a cup of that, you know, these are all applicable things that we need to show students why it's important. Recently I had a young man who just graduated from Bradley, and he talked about, you know, in high school it's all repetition and no application, but in college it's all application and no repetition. You know, and so we've got to kind of bridge that, and we can bring those people in, and then we can also take the students there. We can take a busload of students from the school to Mossville and let them see what the engineers do, or down, you know, wherever engineers are, or down to the hospital and let them see what, you know, lab techs do in a lab. You know, we need to expose people to as much as possible. And it doesn't cost us anything to do that. The cost of a bus ride, you know, and we have, you know, there's Caterpillar and the hospitals and all these great corporations around here that want to be involved. And so we just have to embrace that and expose students, I believe, to as much as possible.
I didn't become a good art teacher until I start to separate and ask the kids, what do you want to do? What are your interests? If I'm interested in drawing, you might be interested in sculpturing. So it's not what I want, it's what you want. And for the first time in a long time, sitting here tonight, you are telling us what you want. And you can't let that voice die. That voice has got to become a part of your daily activities in school. In other words, what I'm trying to tell you is that I think that we're guilty of, as adults, is knowing what's best for you. And that's not always the case. We don't always know what's best for you. But you have to come and you have to tell us. And we have to advocate and get some of these programs that we've talked about into the schools to help you. And I think that it's really rich right now, because you're just on the edge of these people wanting to do this for you. So, you know, unless you are heard, and unless you are, you know, develop some kind of a committee like I had for the Limestone Committee, develop that kind of a committee in your school where you have a group of kids that want to have questions like this about different options, and bring it to the school board, bring it to the people that are going to be on the school board, because we spend a lot of time talking about things, but we don't spend a lot of time talking about you and what's best for you. So you have to really, you know, don't let this stop after this is over tonight. Extend on it. And even when you go to college, you know, please bring that back to the community.
I've been in Peoria practically all my life. Came from Mississippi, all but 6 years of my life. Went to a school named Douglas that they tore down. Went to Irving School, along with Richard Pryor, by the way. Richard lived around the corner from me, so we were in first grade together, second grade. Then went to Greeley, and then they moved us because they built Taft homes, and I moved to the South End. Went to Roosevelt Junior High, was 7th, 8th, 9th, and then went to manual training at 10, 11, 12.
Hi, my name is Brenda Wilson, and I am from Galesburg, Illinois. I graduated there in '92, and I went to Western Illinois University, graduated in '96. I also joined the Illinois Air National Guard from 1993 to 2001 was my full contract, right out here by the airport. It pays your tuition for college if any of you are interested. And I got some computer communications training there. And I lived up in Chicago for a while and came here in 2001. My husband's works with Caterpillar, and we have 2 children, a 1st grader and a 5th grader. And I'm a substitute teacher with District 150. Back in 2003, I did that before becoming a stay-at-home mom. And then I went back in 2010, and I've been subbing all over the district for the past 5 school years, almost 6, I think. And and I just have a major passion to help be a part of some positive change on the school board. I've been attending the school board meetings really religiously for about a year and a half, with the exception of a couple of soccer games, but I'm just excited having some history in the buildings all over the district. I have become enamored of lots of students in the city, and I would like to be a part of the better good. So,
Thanks. My name's Dan Walther. I'm Peoria born and Peoria bred. I went to Greeley grade school, like Ernestine. I went to Woodruff High School. They've closed both those schools. I left there, went to Illinois State University. I've got a bachelor's degree in social studies comprehensive. I've got a master's degree in psychology and guidance. I was a high school guidance counselor at Illini Bluffs High School in Glassford, Illinois. I did that for 5 years. And then I got involved with a couple of professional teacher organizations, the Illinois Federation of Teachers and the Illinois Education Association. And I was a professional negotiator and organizer for both those organizations. I actually brought the Peoria Federation of Teachers into Peoria. And I helped organize a number of the groups, the clerical workers, cafeteria workers. I was the one that organized those groups. So I've had some history with education for about 25 years. I took an early retirement and had been involved with sales for a number of years. And then, like Brenda, I did some substitute teaching about 3 years ago and was not pleasantly surprised with what was going on in the district. It really concerned me with some of the things that were going on. I just felt at that time that you students weren't really getting a fair shake, that there were some problems going on in the district, that I really think District 150 has the potential to be, if not world-class, an excellent public school system. I think we've got the teachers to do that. I think we've got the support staff. I think we have the principals to do that. I just really think that we need to have school board members who understand that direction and can give that kind of leadership to move forward. And so that's the reason I'm running. I just had to do that. I have 4 daughters. It was interesting raising them. They all graduated from Richwoods High School. And so they're all out now. I'm a little bit older than Miss Wilson. And so, but I really have a passion too. I'd like to see a change in direction at District 150, and I'd like to see you folks are getting close to the end, but I would like to see the opportunity for success for the students in the district, and so that's the reason I'm running.
What pressing issues would you guys like to tackle if you do get accepted in the district?
Fair question. I think for me, I would like to see a review of the discipline policies within the district. I think one of the things I found when I was substitute teaching is that there was a lack of consistency in discipline. I remember particularly one day I was at Tree Wynn and I had an 8th grade English class. And I had 3 students who just got up and wandered around. They just kept wandering around. I said, "Okay, guys, it's time to start class." They just ignored me and they kept wandering around. So I said, "You've got till 5. I'm going to call security." And they looked at me like I was speaking some alien language. And so at the end of 5, I went and I clicked the speaker and I said, "This is Mr. Walther in 318, whatever room I was in." I said, "Could I have security up here?" Security came up and the guy kind of laughed. He says, "You'll probably get in trouble for this." And I said, "What are they going to do, fire me? I'm a sub, you know." But what happened was, the important thing about that, those 3 kids who were causing trouble were taken out of my classroom. The class immediately changed because I had gone through the grade books. I was looking at the lesson plan, and I had 5 students who were excellent students. I could tell by their grades and their stuff with it. That class changed dramatically. And so I said, this isn't rocket scientists. You know, if we got the kids who were causing trouble, who had been allowed to cause trouble for a long time, nothing happened to them. They just went to the office for my class period. But what happened was I was able to teach. I was able to get through that. So that was a small example, but I've seen that in other places too, that you really can't have a good learning experience if the teachers have to spend their time trying to handle discipline. You can't get into creative learning. You can't do the kind of exchanges that I would like to have done. So that's really the first thing. And I know it sounds old school, but I just think the discipline part is such an intricate part for that, so that we have learning available for you students.
My top 3 concerns, number 1, are the culture of the school district. I feel like it's a negative culture, and I think that would start with the leadership. I see teachers all the time that I've been saying it. You guys are probably tired of me saying it, but I feel like they're paralyzed by fear. It just feels like the teachers and principals, for that matter, and staff don't feel supported. So I feel like if we had a healthier culture in the district, that teachers would feel supported, principals would feel supported, things could get better. So my number 1 thing is to address the culture, and I think that would start with our leadership, and as well as central administrators. Secondly is the discipline issue. I know there are policies, I don't feel like they're being followed. Some schools are doing it, some aren't. I sub all over the district, so I see it a little bit different in each school. And you have to have kids acting properly or you don't learn, as he just said. So I think that's huge. And lastly, parental and community involvement. I think that we need to build bridges with people in the community that want to help with this, mentoring. I mean, it could be as simple as a reading program where people are volunteering, mentoring, counselors. There's all kinds of different bodies within this community that would like to help, but there's not good communication between District 150 and those bodies. So I would like to see that change, as well as getting parents more involved. Simple things like checking the backpack and just being more involved in their child's life. But I realize that for some people that's just not reality, because there are parents that are stretched thin with two and three jobs, and that's where I think that the community involvement would help, because I know I've been inspired by lots of people that weren't my family. So those would be my top three concerns.
There's a lot of things that I'm concerned about, and mostly I'm concerned that our children are not getting the education they deserve. And so we've got to do some things. We got to deal with the discipline in the classrooms. We got to make sure teachers have all the tools they need to do their job. I think we have to really deal with the truancy issue, because truancy means dollars. And when kids are in school, you get money. And since we are so cash strapped in this district, we got to figure a way to get kids in school and stay in school, and while they're there, to learn what's going on. I also believe that there's been a disconnect between the district and the community. And when I say community, all of our, what I call them, stakeholders. That's the city council, that's the business people, that is parents, that is businesses in schools. So I think we need to reconnect to the community, because so goes the district, so goes the city. If the district isn't running right, the city doesn't run well. People don't come to our city to live, because right now, when people want to come to the city of Peoria, the first thing they ask is, when they have children, is what about the school district? And when they find out that our school is not working, they don't move here. They move to other cities. They move to Washington, and they move to Dunlap, and they move to Morton. And I think what you see is a lot of African Americans that are playing basketball and football and wrestling in Washington and in places like that. And it's because they've said, how are the schools? And someone said to them as they sold them their house, you don't want to go to School District 150. We've got to stop that, because that has an impact on our taxes. That means the city is not getting the money they need. And since our school district gets all their money from, except for the federal dollars, from property taxes, because that's how we fund our schools in Illinois, if people don't move here, we lose money. So whatever happens in the school, it affects our whole our city. So we've got to get a handle on that. We've got to begin to talk to our stakeholders and get our stakeholders involved in what the district is doing. I am sure that as you walk down the halls and you talk to each other and you go to your class and you get in that class, and there may be one person that disruptive of the class, and you don't learn anything that day. We've got to figure out a way to deal with that. How do we take that disruptive student out of that room, but not let them be on the street? Find a place to put them so that they're in an area where they're learning and they're doing the right things. And the reason for all that, because we live in a global society. I mean, when you graduate from college, the chances are you're going to be competing with kids from China, kids from all over the world. And so we want our kids to have what they have, and that's a good education, because you're not going to compete with just people in the city. You're not going to compete with people in Illinois. You're going to compete with people all over the world. And that's what it's like. We want you to have the best.
We take too many tests to decide where we're going to be in life, what we're going to do, what classes we can take, what classes we can't take. And I feel like that's not how it should be based on a computer test. I feel like we make who we are and where we go in life. And I just feel like testing is a really big issue because I'm a junior, but I don't take all junior classes. I take cosmetology and art classes. So that puts me, when I have to take a test for a whole entire week, because we had a snow day, so we had to make up our ACT test, and it was the day before we took our park test. So I was taking tests for 3 days, and I missed basically a whole entire week of school. I missed out lessons plans in my other classes, and so I'm just kind of lost on that. So I feel like we should try to, for the makeup days, we should try to like make it past the park test or past it like before the park test. But that's just what I really have to say about that.
Many of those tests really doesn't test your ability on your classwork.
Yeah.
It tests your ability on something else. And when you get in the world, they're not going to ask you about those tests. They want to know what classes did you take and how well did you do in those classes. I know when I was in school, all the tests was on what I studied, and that was out of my book and what the teacher taught. You're taking tests not on what teachers teach, to do something else. So, I think what we have to do is get in there and analyze all of that. I think we have to put people in place that knows exactly what students need as it relates to how to get you doing things that you're supposed to do, so when you get out of high school, you can go on to college and do well, or you can be a beautician and do well, because you got to learn how to keep your books. So there are a lot of things that I think that can be done to relieve our students of the testing that's going on, and the irrelevant testing, I call it. And we need to relieve our students of that. I just don't remember taking tests. I took the ACT, and I took tests from the classes that I studied, and that was really, and I've done well, without having to do that. So we've got to really look at that and analyze it and see, what the government is asking us to do and what we're asking people to do, because there's a lot of different things involved in that.
The bad part about these tests, because this is first of all, your ACT should not have been the same week of parks. Somebody implemented a bad plan. I mean, that's just not fair to you. So that's, I don't know who did that, but that wasn't fair to you at all. The problem with the tests are that a lot of them are state mandated or federally mandated. And if we as Peoria District 150 said, you know what, we're not going to take the park test. Do you know very many people who like the park test? No. The kids aren't fond of it. The teachers aren't fond of it. But if we refuse to take it, they won't give us money, and we need money to pay teachers and the cost of the school district. So for us to just say nope, we're not doing it, which is what I think most people would love to do for you guys, because you do take too many tests, and then the teachers have to prep you to take those tests, and they're not prepping you for real life skills. So you get out of school and you're taking tests, but like she said, when you get out in the real world, most of that stuff does not matter. But you have to have that ACT to get into college. And the good news is you can keep retaking that ACT, and you can buy books to prep for it, and you can take classes to prep for it. If you have a certain school that you need a certain number, you can keep working at it. But it's unfortunate that our society puts so much importance on these tests. It makes me feel like it doesn't look at you guys like people, it looks at you guys like numbers. So they can get all the information together and say, Peoria's this smart, Chicago's this smart. It's all comparative for surveys, and who looks at that stuff? It's your life that it's time you'll never get back. So I'm not for it, but I think that in order for it to change, we have to go up a few notches, and it's legislative changes. I mean, there are people in Washington, D.C. that make these decisions that have nothing to do with education, but they get your information, and they're the ones, it's all money related, and it's sad because it's your lives. And I'm not for all the tests. I wish that I didn't have to hear you say that story, because it does stink.
There are certain things that Ernestine have said that are true. We can't automatically stop them from doing the test. However, as board members, what we can do is direct a study on the timing of the test. Like you said, the conflict between the ACT and the park. quite frankly, I thought they should have given us a mulligan. It's an old golf term. They weren't ready to do this test. The state was not ready to do this test. So now they're going to use this as a baseline, but that's really not fair to you and a lot of other students. I don't know if you're aware of it. There were students at Normal that picketed. They walked out of school and protested because they were going to not do the test. And I understood that. I understand your frustrations with it. They took the estimates from the school district that it cost $1.5 million to do this test, because after they had to do computers and then 2.5 weeks of time that they took for the test that they took away from your classes was not a good thing. And like we said, we can't stop it. I think I would like to have just say, hey, you're not ready for it. Let's hold off for the year, or don't count the results for this year. It's something you've done. We don't have that control. We'd like to say we have that power. We really don't. But what we can do is the time within the school that you do, and your feedback is good for us. I mean, that gives us some feedback that we understand what's going on with it. We need to hear from you, the students. There needs to be more of that kind of input back from you to us so that we can make some of these decisions, because it does impact on you and the time. Now you're going to have to make up, like you said, in your regular classes for time that you had, and it's mandatory. You've got to take the park test, or any choice. You don't have any choice with that. What we can try to do is work with you and work with the administration to make sure that it's as least intrusive as possible. And so that's things that we can do.
How would you advocate prevention programs for teacher training and high school dropouts?
Well, it's a huge, I do, in my work subbing, I do sometimes see kids come into school and you can tell that they don't want to be there. They just haven't given up yet. And one of the biggest things that I feel like kids don't realize is that an education is something that no one can ever take from you. You can skip out on taxes and go to jail. You can lose a home. You can lose a car. But when you're educated, it is something that you will always have. And I think it would be, a training to have the teachers send some kind of a message to the kids on the importance of an education would be fabulous. Is that what you're talking about? Like I think it would be priceless, because I see so many kids at different schools that just aren't into it, and they don't realize how important it is for you guys to come, show up, be ready to learn, sit in your chair, be quiet, respectful manners. As much as you guys probably don't realize it, you being able to sit in a classroom and just get along with others, it's prep for the real world, because you will work places where you don't care for your coworkers. You will buy a house and you might have neighbors that you don't love, but learning how to get along, as a community, really, even though you're in a school, it's setting you up for your real life. It's setting you up way better than those tests are. That's for sure. But I do, that is one thing, because I say it all the time when I'm subbing to the kids, because there's so many that are just checked out. They're there, but they're not really there. And sending them that message that this is the best thing that you can do for yourself. It's the best thing you can do for your future. Having an education, having a minimum of a bachelor's degree will help you get a better job. It will help you make more money. I think that if we could get that message through to the kids, they would be more interested.
We a lot of times assume that the dropout issue is with you folks at high school. It really is 3rd and 4th grade. A lot of times there's research that shows if a student hasn't got a mastery of reading by 3rd or 4th grade, their chances of dropping out are about 4.5 times the average student. So your question's valid, but I think it has to start at a much earlier time. One of the things we can do is help teachers identify those students that need help at a much earlier age. By the time they're at high school, we may be too late. It may be very difficult to identify that. And it's one of the things, I think, I'm not going to speak for the two, but I've listened to them enough. We all agree early childhood is critical. And we've cut back on that in this thing. That is the biggest asset you can do to help identify that, is that if you can help those kids at the early stages so that they don't fall into that. But your point is, I think it still would be beneficial for teachers to be able to identify students who are having trouble, so that you can identify those potential dropouts much earlier than waiting by the time they get to high school or even middle school. I think that was one of the things we could try to do to help that.
We start with kids when they're coming out of the womb, and that's really in essence what it is, and start working with them at that point. When they get to a certain point at school, teachers know exactly what to do because they have some skills behind them. My granddaughter started Valeska at 3, and it's amazing how she grew through that, and is now on the dean's list. She's going to school, she's on the dean's list, but she's been like that ever since she's been in school. And it started when she was 3, but it also started in our house, because there was an atmosphere of learning in our house, and I think that's where it has to start. I don't think it has to start with the teachers. It's got to start before they get to the teachers, and I think that working with families in their home, getting those kids in childhood education, then getting them to school. There's another caveat that I think that we need to really be looking at, and that's look at the curriculum that they teach young people when they're in college that's going to teach, because that curriculum hasn't changed in a long time. And things are different than it was when I was going to school. It's different than it was when Mr. Walther went to school, and it's different than it was when Ms. Wilson went to school. I was going to say about 1800s here. And things are different. And those curriculums have to be changed to meet the needs of what's happening now. So I think teachers ought to be allowed to teach outside the box. And what that means is all of us learn differently. Kids in class, I learn differently. I remember taking a geometry class and crying through the class because I was an AB student, but I couldn't understand geometry. And I had a teacher that called me to his desk one day and said, "Let me show you how to do this." And it was totally different than the way he was teaching. And all of a sudden a light bulb went off. And there I was. So I think if teachers are allowed to stay in those classrooms, we move teachers around too much. We move principals around so kids don't get a stable environment. So if we keep principals in place, keep teachers in place, they're able to recognize what students need. They recognize what families need, and so they can teach in a way that those students that don't learn on one level, they're able to reach out and let them learn on another level. So we've got to have tools in place to allow teachers to really teach and teach outside the box.
I remember going back, like this was last year, as in 2014 of this school year. We were in our economics class, and this is a class, because it's economics, everyone's required to take it. It's a class that's really mixed, and there's lots of different people in this class, lots of different backgrounds, and students coming from all sorts of places. And I remember being in that class, and remember this is Emmanuel Academy. It's rowdy all the time, and it's usually not that good of a learning environment to be in. And our teacher, he's had enough, and he says, "Why do you guys act like this? You should be so proud to be in school. You've made it all this far. You should just be so proud," and yada yada this, yada yada that. And we're all thinking, are you for real right now? And then, so I guess a student asked him, because he knows this, "Don't you live in West Peoria?" And he says, "Yeah." "So you also have a son, right?" "Yeah." "Why doesn't your son go to Manual then?" And that opened up an entire new thing that I think really affects us as a community with what you said earlier, the fact that we have so many stigmas and stereotypes placed on us that we kind of start believing them when we start feeding into them, and that drags us down on so many different levels, and it makes us feel like we won't compete with these kids from China. We won't compete with these kids from across the state lines. How can we ever think of ourselves highly when we've been told so many times that we are really not of any caliber to anyone else? What do you think that we should be doing as a community, as a school, as a city, to kind of help us as students see that we have potential inside of us? We just need to be taught how to realize it and how to take advantage of it.
I think everyone has that potential inside of them. And I know with my kids, from the time they came into the world, I, number one, told them how beautiful they were. Mm-hmm. I always told them I loved them. I always told them they could be anything they wanted to be. But I exposed them to things that they normally would not have been exposed to otherwise. And I grew up on the South End, and my parents did that to me. I encouraged my children, and when they got to school, the school was able to do the same thing. And I think I'm going to go right back to what I said to you from the very earlier on the last question. I had a principal that was at my school the whole time I was going to school. Same principal. They knew me. They knew my parents. They knew my brothers and sisters because they went there. And I had teachers in that school that was there the whole time I was there. So once I got that encouragement at home, the principal and the teachers who knew all of us did the same thing. Most of my teachers lived in and around in Peoria. They knew other kids that I played with. And so I think what started happening is we started shifting things and changing the way we taught things in school. And a lot had to do with the federal government coming in sometimes and telling you what to do and how to do it. I think discipline was almost non-existent. And it has gotten that way where there's absolutely no discipline in the classroom. I think we're going to have to bring the business community. I think we're going to have to bring the parents, because the parents play a big role in this. I think we're going to have to bring in teachers. I think we're going to have to bring in the medical community. And we're going to have to come together and say, okay, what do we need to do? And how do we need to do it to make sure that the discipline in classroom is better so that the teacher has the ability to teach. And you're right, over 62% of the teachers that teach in District 150 do not live in the city. So, and that's not saying that they can't teach you. That's saying that you can't relate to that, because that's what you just said when he said, don't you live in West Peoria? You can't, and West Peoria is just right across the street. You know what I'm saying? So you made a difference between West Peoria and Peoria, and it's just right across the street. So what are people saying if you live in Pekin and Morton and all around? They're saying saying that. So, but I think that what's got to happen is all of the people that are involved in our schools, we need to be talking about what do we need to do to make this better. We need to talk about not only college, because I'm sure that you're all going to college, but not every child's going to college. So they're in that economics classroom, and they're saying, why are we here? This is not what I want to be. Or they're in another class, this is not what I want to be. I want to be a iron worker that makes a lot of money, makes more money than a lot of people that's in college. But so everybody's not going to go to college. Everybody's got a different thing to talk about. So I think that has an impact. So we got to know what it is that kids want to do. What is your goal? And it may not be college, and that's all right. And we got to let the kids know it's all right. We can't just pump that in. So I think that there's a lot of things we need to do to make things happen differently.
So hearing you say that and seeing the emotion, it almost brought tears to my eyes, because I do know there are a lot of teachers and administrators in Peoria that send their children to private schools. And it's like saying, you're good enough for me to teach you, but I won't send my kids to your school. It's common. And I'll admit, I pulled my son out of public school last year for some various reasons, but he's in private just this year, but we've been a public school family for 5 years, and my daughter's in 5th grade right now at Washington. And one thing that I notice in the schools, when I was mentioning some of those kids that come to school and they're there, but they're not really there, they're not inspired. Their eyes lack a sense of hope. And some people's parents have to work 3 jobs and they don't have time to read to their kids. They don't have money to spend on their kids, and they're doing the best they can with what they have. And unfortunately, as a child, you're not asking to be brought into that situation. And I was a kid like that. And I went to a new school every year all the way up until 4th grade. I was always moved around. It's hard. And the one thing I think, and I'm looking at this from a financial standpoint as well, because our school district is broke and we're in a huge millions of dollars deficit right now. So I was thinking that it would be a good idea to inspire children that you are not your circumstances. No matter how broke your parents are, or if people are addicted to things and they don't have time for you and you feel unimportant, because you're right. If somebody tells you long enough that you're not worth anything, you're going to grow up and think that you're not worth anything, and that is simply not true. It just isn't. I can see in your eyes that you have a future. I can tell by the way you speak. I can tell that you're educated. And even though it might be chaos at school, you're getting something out of it every day. And I've just met you tonight. But I think that it would be a really great thing because everybody has a story. I was the first one in my family to go to college. And I didn't have any money, and I joined the Air Force. I mean, there's ways around it. There are grants. There are so many ways to get a college education these days, no matter how rich your parents are. I think it would be a great idea to pull people from this community to come give you their testimonial. Because when you hear somebody's real story that says, hey, I didn't have any money for college, I didn't ask my parents for any money, but I joined the United States Air Force and I went back to school and got a GI Bill, they paid my tuition, and I'm sitting here as a college graduate. It is possible. Everybody has a story, and there are people all over this community, such as Carl Cannon. I'm sure you've heard of him. Carl Cannon's program is awesome, and I get goosebumps just saying that. He has the Army boot camp mentality mixed with being a correctional officer, tells a story about how he had a full ride to college because of a football talent, but he blew it. Having somebody stand in front of you and say, I blew it, learn from my mistakes, somebody with a true testimony, and I bet you that if somebody put some elbow grease into this and did some homework on it, there would be people all over this community that would be happy to come into the schools, stand on a microphone in your gym for free, and inspire you. And we could even record those and maybe play them on smart boards. But I think that inspiration is the key, because you know what? We're not our circumstance. You're not your past. You can do anything you want to do, and you guys are still young enough to make things happen. You could work for NASA. You could be the next president. The possibilities are endless when you're young, because if you put your heart and your mind into something, it can be done. I just think it's an inspiration thing. And unfortunately, our school district has a culture right now, and it's not just Peoria, but federally even. There's so many different rules with education. Teachers have so many things that they have to try to do in one day that it takes away from creativity time. And that's where this would fall in, inspiration. But I think that an inspirational program would be, I think it would be valuable.
Yeah, I want to thank you for your story. It was very articulate, and you showed an empathy and a passion there that it really touched me. And, but one of the things, the cold reality is right now at Manual, only 6.5% of the graduating seniors from Manual or college prep are ready for that work thing. That's not good. That's not good for you. That's not good for the district. And we can do better. I think we're failing you. I think we're failing Manual. We're failing Peoria High. Quite frankly, in some ways, we're failing Richwoods. Richwoods is doing well. They're holding up their end, but their numbers are dropping. That's not fair to you. We should be able to give you that opportunity. I mean, you're a bright, articulate young man. We were talking about, my story. I went to Greeley Grade School near North Side. I was 8 blocks from Taft Homes. I grew up in Greeley, and we didn't do social promotions then. And I told the story on my 8th grade graduation. 3 of my classmates drove to my 8th grade graduation. People think I make that story up, but it's true, because they don't. If you think about it, you're 14 when you graduate from 8th grade. They'd been held back twice, so they were 16. 3 of them drove, and City Councilman Weaver said, "What kind of car did you drive, Dan?" And I said, "I wasn't one of the 3 that got held back." It was just a little joke there. But there actually were 3, and. Of those 3 that drove, one of them ended up in prison. 2 of them ended up being successful, despite the fact they'd been held back twice. They made successes of themselves. But I think I'd like to see, what's going on with you. The first thing you were honest. You said, my classroom's kind of chaotic. There's not a lot of learning that goes on in there. It was before your time, but there was a counselor there. His name was Jim Bixby. And he had been at Manual for a long time. But Bixby lived in West Peoria. All of his kids went to Manual. He taught there, and his kids are there, and he was proud of Manual. He never missed a game and did that thing with it. But we're right, we're not seeing that. Their teachers are getting to the point where they're saying, hey, look, we're not getting the support in school. I'm not going to put my child in that classroom, and that's not fair to you or to the thing there. But you would want the school to be good enough that you could say, yeah, I put my daughter there. I've been married twice. I'm over 2 on the marriage thing. I'm not real good on that. But my first marriage, my youngest daughter, I wanted her to go to public school, and we're building a new house. I had trouble finding a lot in Peoria, and I had all these real estate agents that here, we can get you over here in Dunlap, and really, if you just go across, I said, no, I want her to go to Richwoods. I wanted her to finish up. I had 3 daughters that went there. I had to fight to find a place to do that. But I believed enough in public education that I thought it was important for them to finish up at Richwoods, and she did do that. And so, but I think, I just appreciate your story, and I think we can do better.
And I just want to thank you all for coming and giving your time and your testimony. And I hope that your ideas influence the district and is for change. Thank you.
I would just like to thank you guys for coming here and listening to our opinions and taking note on what we as students want and need from our schools.
I want to say thank you for just taking your time and listening to what we have to say. It's nice when you have people like you to just listen to what we feel is going on in our district and what's going on in our school.
Just remember the quote, it takes a village to raise a child. So apply that. Don't just come at this like when we're raising kids, we have to take it from a school board's perspective. No, you have to take it from the community's perspective. Make them grow in that community so they can go off and do better things in the world. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank all of you very much.